In this video, I want to talk to you all about the rotator cuff, why your shoulder may hurt when you're training or lifting your arms up, and the 3 things that you can be doing in order to assess and understand in order to help that shoulder pain.
Don't forget, if you like our content and you want to see more from us and more videos to help with your health and well-being, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so that we can notify you as soon as we launch any new content.
So what is the rotator cuff? Well, the rotator cuff is the collective name for the 4 muscles that hold our shoulder joint in place. So our shoulder joint is made up of what we term a ball and a socket. We call it a ball and socket joint. So the ball fits the socket. So the top of our arm bone comes into the shoulder blade, which has the reciprocal socket. Now, these joints allow for lots of movement, but the shoulder itself is held in place, is held in position by 4 muscles. These muscles are the supraspinatus, the subscapularis, the infraspinatus and teres minor. But to make things easy, we give them the collective name of the rotator cuff. So these 4 muscles that hold the shoulder joint in place. Now they have 2 roles. They have roles to create mobility and movement in the shoulder, but very importantly, they also create the stability of the shoulder. So they hold the shoulder joint in the correct position when we're using them. So why do we develop pain in the front of the shoulder? Well, firstly, let's talk about that a little bit, because most typically when we see people in clinic with pain, they present with pain on the top of the shoulder or front of the shoulder here. And this pain can typically run down the arm as well. We most commonly see a problem when we look to bring the arm to about 90 degrees, and we can often feel like a pinch or a sore point around the shoulder at that point. So why is that happening? Well, let me explain a little bit more with our knowledge of the rotator cuff. So we have these 4 muscles, and the tendons of these muscles come up and they attach into the shoulder. But the important thing to understand about the shoulder joint is we have a space in there for which these tendons pass. We call this the subacromial space. Now what can happen as we bring the arm to 90 degrees is we close that space. The other thing to bear in mind is that the space is much tighter, you can see at the front of the shoulder, compared to the back. So if we round our shoulder or bring our shoulder forwards into the joint, that can close up that space. And if we've got some inflammation of this tendon, what can happen then is it can pinch. We also have nerves passing through this area here. So if we catch those nerves, that's where we can get the pain running down the arm. So as a result, what we typically see are problems doing lifting movements, or ones that involve us rolling our shoulder forward. So that might be a bench press if we're in the gym, or a press up which rolls the shoulder forwards, will then impinge in that area and cause these shoulder impingements, or what we may term a rotator cuff impingement. So that's why it's a very common complaint, a very common condition that we see, but that is what's happening at the area. So it's a problem with the one or multiple of the 4 muscles that make up the rotator cuff. But if we get some inflammation or problem around this area at the front of the shoulder joint, then that's where we can develop these issues and develop the pain. So what do we do about that? Well, there's 3 things we probably want you to be addressing, first of all, to understand how that you can improve that and reduce the pain. Firstly, stretching. Now, in order to understand if you're tight or have a lack of flexibility of your rotator cuff muscles, you want to conduct an assessment of your shoulder. And in particular, some of our favourite assessments of the shoulder is looking at both internal and external rotation. So how do we do this? Well, take the good arm, take the arm that is either doesn't hurt or hurts less, and what you want to do is reach up your spine as far as you can go. This will be showing you the amount of internal rotation you have at that shoulder. Now compare that to the bad side. What we might typically see with someone is that they struggle to lift that arm up the spine. That shows us that we have a reduction in internal rotation. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we need to stretch out the muscles that cause external rotation. So of that rotator cuff, that's 3 of those muscles. So if you're finding this difficult, we know that 3 of those muscles might be tight. Now the other test we can do is we can test ourselves into external rotation. Now the way we do that is almost the opposite. Rather than reaching up the spine, what I want you to do, starting on the good side, is to reach down the spine. Take your hand over the shoulder and reach down the spine and see how far you can go. Again, what you then want to compare is how far you can go on the bad side. Can you reach down as far, or is that side limited? If it's limited, we know we're limited into external rotation, so it means we might be tight in the internal rotators, so the muscles that sit on the front, notably your subscapularis. So if we have a restriction in those, what we need to do is we need to stretch those, and we have a few stretches that we really like. But a handy bit of kit would be a towel. A towel works really well to stretch out the rotator cuff. You can also use a stick. But what you want to do with the good arm, or the side that you're not looking to stretch, is take the towel and place that over your shoulder. What you can then do with the side that you're looking to stretch, if we're looking to stretch into internal rotation, is to hold the bottom of that towel. With the top arm, what you look to do is pull up, and that will be creating an additional stretch, further internal rotation, and you should feel that pull in the back of the shoulder. If you want to be stretching the other muscles, so if you want to be stretching in external rotation, all we do is the opposite. So what we want to be doing now is pulling down on the towel so that the arm at the top is then being stretched into external rotation. You can then change sides to repeat that stretch for both sides, and this allows you to stretch both into internal and external rotation. A reminder that we want to be holding those stretches for at least 30 seconds. Another stretch that we really like for the rotator cuff is what we term the sleeper stretch. Now for the sleeper stretch, what you want to do is lie on your side. You want to bend your arm to 90-90 position. So that means that we lift our arm to 90 degrees and then 90 degrees at the elbow. With the other arm, the side we're not looking to stretch, we place the hand behind the elbow, and that leaves the elbow behind the hand of the arm that we're looking to stretch. And then all we do is we simply push down into internal rotation, and you should feel a stretch at the back of the shoulder. You want to be holding this stretch for 30 seconds. The next thing that we find to be really beneficial for the rotator cuff is to be doing some self-myofascial release or massage work. And a tool that can work really well here is something like a lacrosse ball or a hockey ball or a golf ball, something that we might have. But what you want to be doing is placing that ball, most notably behind the shoulder blade. Place that against the wall, and then what you can look to do is be rolling around, so you're applying the pressure from the shoulder blade onto the ball, which is having the reciprocal force coming back from the wall. And what you may find are some sore points around the back of that shoulder blade, particularly as it comes up and attaches into the back of that shoulder. If you find a sore point, what we want to do is adopt our pin and stretch method. So what this means is that we look to pin that tissue, so place the ball into that sore point and hold on there for a few seconds. Once we find that sore point, we can then look to rotate the arm inwards and outwards, so you'll be stretching that tissue over the pressure of the ball, and that will create a release sensation around that shoulder. You can also then place the ball into the front of the shoulder and look to find the sore points in the front of the shoulder. Again, if we find a sore point, hold the ball in that area, and then we want to stretch over the top. We do this by pulling our straight arm backwards to be feeling an additional stretch. The third thing that you want to be assessing is your strength of the shoulder. Now, again, I mentioned at the start of this video that the rotator cuff muscles have two roles. They look to help with mobility, to create movement, and stability. So we want to be assessing these and building the strengths of both these components. So there's multiple ways that we can do this. Now, what I wanted to do is just pick out a couple of exercises that we use to really look to help and assess your own stability. So firstly, for the stability side of things, as these are a big stabilizer of the shoulder, what I want you to do is go into a high plank position. What you then look to do is move one hand to touch the other hand, bring the hand back to the start position, and then the other hand comes over to touch that hand. And what you're doing is, when you're lifting one arm, the arm that is now in contact with the ground, we're assessing the stability. So do you feel a difference as you go from one side to the other? Because this might highlight that you have an instability at that shoulder. To make that exercise a little bit more difficult, what you can do is do a press up and then complete on the upward phase of the press up, the hand tap scenario. And that will just be making that a little bit more difficult, but again, looking to compare your stability from one side to the other. Finally, you want to be looking at the mobility strength of your shoulder. Now, again, what we look to do is a few simple movements, and the key here is the form, not the weight that you're lifting. So this can be completed with either no weight or a household object like a bottle of water or a light dumbbell, but we would always recommend starting as light as possible, around the 1 kg, 2 kg mark, because what we're looking for is that you can gain full mobility. And we talk about doing 4 different movements. The first movement is what I call fronts, where we look to lift our arm with a straight arm as far up as we can, and then slowly lower that back down. The next movement is what we call sides. What we're looking to do here is a similar movement, but rather than moving forwards, we're just looking to take our arm out to the side, all the way to the top, and again, slowly lower that back down, making sure that the downward phase is nice and slow. The third movement is what we call ins and outs. Now, what we want to do here is tuck our elbow into our ribs, and it's really important that the elbow remains in contact with the ribs at the whole time when completing this exercise. You'll notice the difference in how you're recruiting the key muscles if you do that. Now, what we want to do is rotate our arm outwards as far as we can go, and then bring our hand back to the start point and rotate it inwards towards our stomach. And then you can repeat that exercise. Again, I emphasize making sure you're keeping your elbow tucked into your ribs. And the final movement that we do is what we call ups and downs. Now, for this, we want to take our arm out to that 90-90 position. So 90 degrees and 90 degrees at the elbow. Now, the key thing here is that the upper arm remains fixed in that position. And what you look to do is you rotate the arm upwards, back to the start position, and then rotate downwards. Now, a reminder, we would typically see the downward phase being a little bit difficult as we roll the ball forwards into the socket and close up that subacromial space. So with all of these exercises, you only want to be working in your pain-free zone. So if you get to a certain point in an exercise and it hurts, just don't go that far in the exercise. And then over time, what you'll be looking to do is to build that pain-free zone as you increase the exercise and as you increase your strength. We would recommend doing 12 repetitions for this exercise. I hope that video was helpful. As I say, something that we see very, very common in clinic is these issues with the rotator cuff. Some of the common things that we tend to see is anything where we're lifting our arm upwards, or gym goers. It can be termed bench presser's shoulder because it's so common in people that bench press or press up. This is really just an introductory into some of the details. It's a very complex area, the shoulder. So we would always recommend, if you're suffering this pain, that you're getting your detailed assessment around that. And I'd encourage you to check out our virtual clinic where we can conduct these assessments for you. You'll see the link in the description below. But if you have any comments, love to hear your views. Drop a comment in the box below and let us know how you've resolved your shoulder issues. There's multiple exercises that can do this, but we want to understand the key fundamentals of, firstly, what is the rotator cuff? Why does it create pain in the area? And the 3 things you need to be addressing, which is the flexibility and stretching of the shoulder, to be making sure that the tissue is working nicely, and that can be aided by self-myofascial release, massage and rolling. And thirdly, to make sure that the shoulder is suitably strong in both its mobility and its stability function.